everyone, and welcome to another episode of Loss of Lieutenant. My name is Tristan. I am your host tonight, joined by my fellow host, Jordan. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad at all. I finally have like a actual setup at home for doing this. As the listeners can probably tell, or the viewers who are watching on YouTube can tell by the fact that I have a camera, and hopefully my voice is sounding a little bit better too.
Absolutely. Jordan, what are we talking about today?
Well, today you have dragged me here to do a proper introduction to the community for the two new hosts that Lost of Lieutenant has hired. But more specifically, we are talking about tournaments, how to win, and how to have fun while doing it.
Absolutely. So we're going to spout some shit and get promptly kicked off. So this is the first the first and last time you'll see us by ourselves on this podcast.
Dad is never going to let us out again after this. We had one chance and we're blowing it.
That's it. All right. Before we get into the main topic, we have this quarter's challenge, the Custom Mission Challenge. Super successful last year. This year, we're letting you submit up to 2 custom missions. Give us the updated versions of your previous custom missions. Make it competitive, make it narrative. And after the challenge is over, the Lost of Lieutenant crew will be running a tournament with the 3 best custom missions, just like we did last year.
It honestly reminds me I need to actually submit mine because I have one just sort of sitting ready to go.
So
good reminder.
Hopefully this will be released maybe 30th of September, so tomorrow, day after this recording. You have until the 7th of October to submit your custom missions, so get the fuck on it.
Yeah, you have no excuses. Submit submissions. We will literally read anything.
Yes, submit to lossoflieutenant@gmail.com. Excellent. Your new hosts. Well, we're going to go through our little accolades. What makes us the people to talk to about winning tournaments and having fun at them? Well,
oh God, I hate this part so much.
My good friend Jordan here has been playing Infinity for a fairly short amount of time, maybe a little less than 2 years or a little more than 2 years.
A little over 2 years at this point. I think it was June or July 2022 is when I started playing.
Yeah, okay. So 2 and a bit years. Yeah. You've attended 5 2-day events, being 2 CanCons, 2 Burn City Brawls, and a Border Bash.
That's correct.
Yep. You've come top 5 each time. There's been no less than 40 people at each tournament, and you smashed Border Bash and won it outright with so little effort. It was incredible.
Yeah, definitely. That's absolutely, that is a complete factual retelling of what happened. I showed up smashed out of my mind both days. I was belligerent and awful both days. No effort required whatsoever.
100%.
Oh my God. Oh God. And you, Tristan, you have been playing for how long now? Because you talk about N3 like you played N3, and that's psychotic.
If anyone can remember when Tunguska came out, I think it was about 2018 I started playing. The first time I played, I fucking hated it. Hated it.
I remember watching my first couple of games of Infinity and being like, why would I ever want to play this game? Yeah. This looks awful. Though that might be because Val was one of the people playing. And watching him play games is awful.
Yep. So I've been playing since N3. Haven't got into tournaments until after COVID though. So only N4 for tournaments.
Yeah. And you've done well for yourself as well, right? And you're also clearly a much better person to play against than I am, considering your sporting accolades.
Yep, two-time. I feel like Dr. Disrespect now. 2-time best sports award for myself.
Let's hope you don't feel too much like Dr. Disrespect right now.
Yeah, I know. So. Yep, I smashed a BCB and I was like, oh my God, I got best sports. And then I tied with our good friend Lachlan Summers for best sports at Border Bash as well, which was very
Mostly
fun.
Because Lachlan Summer only plays lists that don't actually kill models, so his opponents had a great time.
That's great. And
I know.
Absolutely. You were part of giving me that best sport award,
I was
You
our
absolutely
yeah, our
were.
game our game was a time. It was a yeah, if you wanna see what happened to Tristan at Border Bash, you will
Yeah.
need to go and listen to my interview after
Yeah.
Border Bash.
Episode 113, if anyone wants to find that out.
Jesus Christ, why did you have that off the
Because
cuff?
I
My
looked it up to
God.
find the lists.
Oh
All right.
my God.
We're going to be talking about tournaments, how to get better at tournaments, how to be more consistent at tournaments, and how to have more fun. Because that's the whole fucking point you're there, right?
How to be
Tournaments,
a better opponent for how to be a better opponent for your opponents, because we're gonna say this line a bunch throughout the entire like this little spotlight episode. Infinity is a game you play with your opponent. Against them is secondary.
absolutely. So, first thing that happens, someone hops on Facebook, writes a little thing, and a tournament's announced. And you go, oh, fuck, I want to go to that. What do you do, Jordan?
So the way that I tend to approach my faction choices for events is I have started locking myself into a faction for an entire year at this point. So most recently, it was a full year of Vanilla Combined Army through the last part of N4. And now, provided that CB doesn't take away my baby boy Liang Kai, we're going to be locked into Pano for the forthcoming year. But who knows what's going to happen there. So my choices for events are pretty locked in from when events are announced. Like, well, I am playing this faction, and unless the faction I am playing is just completely incapable of successfully navigating a mission lineup, like if I was playing, I don't know, Ariadna and 4 of the 5 missions were entirely focused around hackers, I'm probably just going to be playing the faction that I picked for the year. It's a really good way to do it as well. Like, if you don't want to stress too much about what you're taking to an event, and if you want to get really sort of locked in on one faction, just play the faction for a year. Like, it's a great way to get your hobby through as well, because you're playing it for the entire year, you might as well get stuff painted, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm a little bit more fickle than yourself. So either I go, ooh, what's the latest shit like Torchlight? And I jump on that. Or I look at a mission lineup and go, ooh, what's the best fucking faction to run for this mission lineup? Because I need to give myself all the chances I can get to win.
I
So,
will say, watching Josh, podcast host Josh, try and decide what he was playing for CanCon this year was the most fucking clown fiesta shit I've ever seen in my life. I think he changed factions like 4 times before the event until he eventually went,
even this
fuck it.
BCB, I don't think Josh had a faction locked in till like 2 days before.
No, it was more than that. I think as soon as JSA got announced as becoming their own faction, I think he finally went, okay,
Yeah,
we're taking JSA out for one last
yeah,
ride.
makes sense. So, unlike us, who are a bit, we know what we're doing. If you kind of go, I want to have the best chance of winning a tournament, right? I think Jordan might be correct in the aspect of experience level is massive for playing a faction. The more experience you have will be very paramount to how well you do with them. And if you pick up a new faction, you don't have a bunch of time to practice. You might just be better off sticking with an older faction, even if it's not like, ooh, you know, a bunch of like, even if you're playing tack into fucking hacking missions or whatever.
Yeah. Infinity, thankfully, unlike a lot of other war games, isn't one that is defined by a single best faction. Like, anything on pretty much any given day can take out a tournament. Like, Vanilla Combined is commonly seen as probably the best faction right now, but BCB was just won by Cosmoflot, and then I think before that it was me at Border Bash with Combined. But then before that it was like Toha for like 3 events in a row, and
Yes.
you don't generally see people complaining about how broken and OP Toha are. But Infinity is very much any given faction on any given day, and player skill is super important.
Yes. Skill is the number one, I would say the number one factor. And the secondary factor is 100% luck.
Yep,
Because
100%. It's an enormous thing. Something that everyone sort of does need to know when it comes to trying to take out a 5-day event is that there, in no small part of it, luck is going to be a huge factor. Winning 5 straight games of Infinity, you're going to need some face-to-face rolls to go your way. And you're also going to need to accept to yourself that if you get unlucky and you lose one of those games, it happens. Like, luck is, as much as people probably don't want to admit it, luck is a very important part about winning an event, any event.
Absolutely. So when it came to Border Bash, the missions rolled around for you. You're in your year of combined army. How does this mission lineup look to you in terms of making lists?
This mission lineup presents some interesting problems for combined army, particularly. You only see one hacking bonus, which is generally where combined armies shine the most in acquisition. Evacuation, as well, as a mission where scoring highly is going to be very difficult, which means where it's placed in round 3, you're going to split the pack enormously in terms of how everything sort of settles out. And with Power Pack in round 1, thankfully, that means that hopefully the tables have been set up with Power Pack in mind. My approach for this is looking at, okay, well, what tools do I have access to? What's going to be good? Your fast paramedics for supplies, your general specialist for something like frontline because of the 4 classifieds.
Yep.
Engineers, remember, for acquisition because you do have the engineer bonus as well as the hacking bonus. And how the fuck do you approach evacuation as a mission? Oh, good God, I hate feeding those stupid civilians into the wood chipper.
Yes. Yeah, so I kind of looked at this mission lineup and went, there's nothing too specialist heavy.
No, there's no big, massive specialist requirements. It's a lot of order requirements. Like,
Yes.
evacuation is the most order-heavy mission in the game. Supplies, there's a lot of order spent moving boxes around. What that did tell me, though, is that you can pretty comfortably build, with a lot of factions, one list that can do basically all 5 of these missions. And in doing so, you can then build a list, 2 lists, and you can build 2 lists to tailor towards matchups and tables, especially with a mission like Power Packs in there.
Yeah.
Deployment zones can be super hostile for certain factions.
Yeah, so we'll move on to, this is the list that won Border Bash. All 5 fucking games. So, run us through how you came to make this list. Run us through the list first, just for everyone listening. Everyone's probably heard it 5 times already because we've talked the shit out of this list.
Yeah, so this is a soon-to-be illegal vanilla combined army list. The best CA tag, with the Corrupted Lieutenant hacking device upgrade +1 damage, the Umbra Samaritan hacker with upgrade Trinity, the Dartok hacker, Imatron, T-Drone missile launcher, Singular Datarazzi, Liberto Mine Layer, Tiger, the good one, the cheap Raicho profile, the 73.1, where he doesn't have a template weapon, but that doesn't matter. Bit and Kiss, the good one, where they both have pitches, Ardrone, Icadron, and a Gaki to round out the list.
Excellent. So, you mentioned before that you kind of made your lists for faction and table matchups. What was this designed to go at?
This was designed for big game hunting, basically. So you can see that there's a lot of options for punching through heavy armor in the form of the Raicho, and also a really strong active turn guided plan with the Whip 16 hacking from the Corrupted, allowing me to sort of actually just roll 16s to try and spotlight things in my own turn. The other thing it's really good at as well is stopping people from really coming into me really effectively, because the Raicho is so good at just kind of like posting up and acting as an ARO piece in some ways, because the combination of crit immunity on it and being immune to the good hacking program into tags with being a veteran means that actually shifting it is particularly difficult. So this list bullies really effectively, and it also trades up really effectively as well, in my opinion at least. I'm gonna be really, really sad to see this list go, honestly. It served me extremely well.
It's also, in typical CA fashion, very resilient to getting your lieutenant assassinated. Obviously, the Corrupted's very important, but you're not really ever going to go into loss.
Yeah, and the main thing is, if you do go into loss, you're like, you mean I still have a Corrupted?
Yeah.
Like, because bricking the Cronted entirely is actually quite difficult with that BTS 6, making Carbonite not a super efficient program to use into it. And it also just feeds into my overall philosophy with Combined Army, where I try to not take the apex profiles of Combined Army, like your Anathematic, your Avatar, your Norkius, for instance.
Yep.
And instead, I would try and take the profiles that were one step down from that. So you're like still fantastic, like A profiles, like the Caronted, the Samaritan, and the cheap Raicho instead of one of the expensive ones. I mathed it out at one point, and by doing that, I'm saving 31 points just on
Yeah.
its own, and being able to redistribute all that through the rest of the list allows me to bulk up the list to just fit in more redundancy for the most part.
100%. When you're having like 4 really good hackers, a tag, you have a bunch of warbands that trade up super well, and you've still got the full 15 orders.
Yeah, full 15 orders, full 6 wick. It's also really good for splitting your opponent's attention as well, because likely they'll tunnel vision on one of two things, either the Raichu or the Caronted. And if they do that, one, they have to ignore one of the other pieces, and two, then you have the Umbra Samaritan there, who weirdly people seem to overlook this piece a lot. Like everyone's like, oh, it's not Norkius, I can ignore this. This model has done nothing but excel for me ever since I put it on the table. I will never stop singing the praises of the old Umbra Samaritan.
Excellent. All right. We'll move to the list that you didn't use, but is still good.
Right, so this is the Monster Fucker permit. Brand in Group 1, we have Sheskin, Red Fury, Bit and Kiss again, the good one, Datarazzi, 2 Imitrons, Icadron, T-Drone, Umbra Samaritan, Hager, Liberto Mindlayer. In Group 2, the Caronted Lieutenant, this time the one with the MSV3 and the HMG. The Dartok Hacker, a second Datarazzi, Motorized Bounty Hunter, a R-Drone, Flash Pulse Bot.
Excellent. So, what was this theoretical list for?
So this list was in case of I was going to run into either heavy mimetism, so Bakunin, OSS,
Steel Phalanx.
Steel Phalanx as well. And it gives me a lot of options into those armies. The Caronted's able to smoke shoot more efficiently than anything else. Also anything where you see a lot of camo, because you can just drop smoke in front of the Caronted, then look at thing, kill thing, look at thing, kill thing, look at thing, kill thing, in terms of camo markers on the table.
Yep.
The other thing it was designed to punch into really efficiently, it's designed to punch into light infantry and medium infantry. Anything where I'm not dealing with armor in excess of 5, this list is going to kill with remarkable efficiency.
Yep.
And as a way to dissuade my opponent from really trying to play stupid games with me, you still have the presence of 3 of the 4 hackers from the previous list. And you have a really strong reactive turn guided plan, in that if your opponent tries to move into your DZ, you're going to get a bunch of free spotlights from the multiple deployment zone repeaters you have, and you still have the exact same level of network projection with Bit and Kiss and the Dartok.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. So, have you run this list before? Not in a tournament necessarily, but in like a friendly game?
I've run versions of it before. There was a few, not iterations of this list, but it was more just like trying to find the right balance. And even then, looking at the list now, there are still things in it that I'm not 100% sold on. The Motorized Bounty Hunter, I think, is a little bit weird. I'm not quite sure how I feel about that one even today. But it felt pretty good to play for the most part. Like, a big thing with Combined, or a big thing just sort of in general, is like, once you're really comfortable with a faction, you can sort of build lists however you most enjoy, and doing so allows you to kind of just like focus more on what your opponent's doing, focus more on like the enemy factions, because you know your faction inside and out. You know everything you need to know, and expanding your knowledge base to kind of cover the other factions in the game narrows down the number of like nasty surprises that you're really going to get hit with.
Yeah. All right. We're going to move to my less impressive list building possibilities. So, my very first list, I was kind of building a bit more traditionally in terms of picking missions for lists, because that's just kind of how I've done it before. TLB being a very new faction at the time, one thing we didn't mention as well is your list was very, very, very good at dealing with Torchlight Brigade, and I think you specifically mentioned that you wanted it that way because you knew there'd be a bunch of people playing TLB.
Yeah, the best CA tag list, I knew there was going to be at least 3 Torchlight players at the event, and I wanted a list that could really efficiently hunt Torchlight and, like, put Warheads on Foreheads versus Torchlight, especially knowing how, like, averse they are to taking more than, like, 1 or 2 guns.
How impossible it is to take more than 1 or 2 guns in Torchlight.
Yeah, that.
Well, we'll go through my first list. We have a lovely core of a Doak multi-sniper rifle MSV1 with a Hellblazer as the glue, Ment Chain of Command, Kappa Hacker because it's cheap, and a non-lieutenant Raven Eye. We have the Prime as the lieutenant in a Harris with a Wave Rider, and another Hellblazer. And then we've got the special source of Hippie and a Kludger Doctor in a duo.
Her emotional support Kludger.
Group 2 is a Strider FO with +1 burst light shotgun, 1 Moonraker mine layer, and a Flash Pulse bot and a Warcore. So unfortunately for this, having Hippie and a Kludger and a Prime and a whole core kind of means you can only fit 14 guys. But
yeah,
this worked really well for me for Power Pack, having the 16-inch DZ and having a duo of a Hippie and a Kludger, and they both have really good movement skills. She just ran across the table and fucking pasted everything. I was playing again. Sure. I did play Val and fucking kicked his ass.
Even with the 14 orders, you still present the possibility of like a drop troop as well, which is a nice little surprise for a lot of people.
Absolutely, and people also underestimate in TLB how much extra shit you get. So the Strider and the Vidok both have NCO. The Prime has TAC aware. So you're not really missing out. You've got the orders kind of where you want to spend them.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so this was more the 16-inch DZs, the looting, I think, not looting, Power Pack, and potentially like evac, although it kind of depended. My other list, very similar core, except the Raven Eye is a lieutenant. We've got the secret source of a yellow jacket in there. Yep. We have the same Harris of the Prime, and losing Hippie and the Kludger lets me add another Moonraker in there, along with probably something else. The Doctor.
The Lambda as well, right?
Yep. So a little bit more midfield defense. The yellow jacket could be used in evac to maybe grab a guy. Really good at classifiers in frontline. Sometimes just walking in, if you're going second, sometimes walking in a drop troop in a zone is really effective.
Yep.
Yeah, sometimes I just didn't want to take Hippie.
No, totally. I totally understand that. I'm actually curious. When you're sort of building lists, are you finding you're iterating after practice matches? Because I tend to try and not iterate lists heavily based on just a few practice games, because I tend to find as soon as you start iterating based on matches that you're having, you can start losing sight of what the list was meant to be originally, and you end up like trying to put weird pieces in that don't quite work, but they are like good theoretically into like matchups that you've been playing.
No, I very much am kind of make a list and kind of stick with it. It'll only be very slight changes, maybe moving something from a group to another group or that kind of thing. My best performance was probably a CanCon with Cosmoflot, and the list I ran for that was the very first Margot and Durok list I ever wrote, and I just ran that. So I didn't iterate on it at all. Very similar to this, I kind of just write the list, play it a bunch. If it's hot garbage, I'll just write a complete new list. I won't kind of mess with it.
I totally get that. Because, like, something I found when I was, like, I was only able to play very limited amounts of Infinity at a lot of points throughout the last year. I found that even though I wasn't playing as much Infinity, because I was talking about, like, the game so much and so consistently, I really don't feel like I missed out on too much for the most part. And it made me sort of rethink how much I sort of valued over practicing, especially I think when I was playing Morat specifically, I played way too many practice games with Morats. I think
Yep.
very much killed a lot of my enthusiasm for the faction.
Yep, that's fair. I feel like if you practice a bunch, and especially if you practice against the same person a bunch, you might fall into really bad habits in terms of list building.
Oh my
So you
god,
might be like, "Oh, I'm playing
yes.
against Bakunin 5 times before the tournament," and you go, "Oh shit, I'm really gonna need that fucking MSV in both my lists or whatever." Like you kind of skew your list, and
Yeah, that's the redundant tools are something where it can end up being very bad for you once you start like doubling up on tools between two lists. Where
mm,
it's like, oh no, I need MSV in all my lists because if I don't have MSV, what am I going to do into X? It's like, well, you take MSV in one of your lists, or if you have just a MSV piece that's like universally good, like I don't know, like a Riot Girl basically.
yep,
Like you can definitely take it in both your lists, but you don't need to sort of tunnel vision on a singular piece like that.
yeah, absolutely. All right, time to practice. So, do you find you write a list with a strategy in mind, kind of deal?
Yeah, so I definitely at the start I wrote lists with missions in mind. I still remember I think my first 1 day event, I had a very clear plan in mind. I was like, I'm going to play this for this mission, I'm going to play this for this mission, and this for this mission. And then I got there, and that plan entirely went out the window immediately because if I played a list into someone, it was going to get destroyed because the list was counted by the faction.
Yep.
And from then on, basically, I don't think I've built for missions pretty much ever since then. Every time since then, it's trying to be build two lists that can do all 5 missions. Some missions better than others in the factional lineup, but make sure I've got everything covered. And it's sort of like usually like this list can do all 5 missions, but it really excels at these two. This list can do all 5 missions, but it really excels at these three. And then build for sort of the dangerous factional matchups for you, and like put the pieces you need into each list, basically.
Yep. Yep. So, develop a strategy. For you, that was you guided the fuck out of everything and throw a tag in people's face.
Pretty much, yeah. Like figuring out what's going to work best, especially when I knew that there's going to be that much torchlight at the event. Finding out where sort of like the weak points in that faction were, like where the choke points, like the Prime specifically is a really big choke point for that faction. Um, Finding out where I could sort of like break a lot of like stalemated games, like being able to just kind of go, well, the Raicho isn't disposable, but because the list has this much redundancy built into it, I can sort of play aggressive with it and kind of see what I can sort of do. And it's the same with pretty much all the pieces in that list, right? Like Bit and Kiss throwing pitches is a pretty risk-free play, and this is a
Mm.
low chance of them being retaliated against. So I can refill those if I need to. Like the Umber Samaritan, being as hypermobile as it is able to sort of like just go forward and try and cause as much havoc as it can. Because as soon as it gets one kill, it becomes very difficult to stop a piece like that.
Yeah. Yep. So
What
for the regular layman practice, obviously knowing like playing missions you don't understand, getting familiar with the missions and how they play is obviously important if you want to do well.
Yes. Please do not read the mission on the day of the event.
Don't read the mission on the day of because it will be rough for you.
It's gonna be a very rough time.
Yep. If you can, try and get games against factions you know you're going to have trouble with. Don't try and get easy games to validate your list or whatever. Stress test it.
Yeah, that's a really big thing. You can't just try and go like, well, no, like if my list is winning, it means the list is good. It's like, yeah, but if you just sort of been punching down, like, are you trying to get the best practice possible? Like, there is absolutely there's different value in the practice games you get based on the opponent that you're playing.
Absolutely. Coming from a TO as well, this point's kind of big. Practice playing within a tournament time limit. So a
Yeah,
practice game that goes for 3.5 hours, sure, it's great if you're a new player because you're learning a bunch of stuff, but if you know how to play the game, it's good to be able to make good decisions quick.
Yeah, like playing to a time limit is super important. Mostly just because to help the TOs sort of keep the tournament moving along at a really efficient pace. But also it's not even just about like playing to get stuff over and done with. It's about like playing so you don't get bogged down in your own like spinning thoughts about the game. Like decision paralysis is huge in Infinity, and if you can just sort of like play through it and just like you're like nope, just got to keep moving, keep moving, keep moving, and not get bogged down in like oh no, should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? Should I do this? Just being able to like keep moving, keep playing, you're gonna find that you're gonna like go to time very infrequently.
Yep, yep. And it's also an aspect of being a good opponent, playing to
Yeah.
time. No one wants to go half into their lunch and then realize they don't really have enough time to go get lunch from where they wanted to go get it, and they come back late for round two or whatever, and you go, that kind of sucked. So no one
No,
wants to. No one wants your first turn to take an hour and a half.
yeah, no one wants to see your like deployment take an hour. I don't care how good your deployment is. You've just taken an hour of the time that we have available to us to deploy. Please don't do that.
Absolutely, and that comes down to the fundamentals. Deployment is I think, one of the biggest fundamentals of Infinity, because it's one of the only games where you can lose in deployment.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
that's exactly what happened to me when I played against you. I deployed like a dumbass, and I paid for it. And I was really, really, really on the back foot.
Yeah, I think you'd gotten into your own head a fair bit, like coming into the game, and it seemed like you completely changed the way your list was supposed to deploy because you were worried about certain aspects of what I was doing.
Yep. Yep. So learning how to, or just thinking about how your list is supposed to deploy is very important. In terms of that, uh, layering your AROs, very important. Especially like in terms of list building and then in terms of playing the game, figuring out how you're going to protect important things if you're going second. Always have a game plan for going second and for going first.
Yeah.
Because you can't just make a list going, ooh, I'm going to go first all the time.
No.
It's not going to happen.
No. Another really important thing as well is like to take note of how the sort of the layout of the table is going to work during the game. Like you don't want to put your lieutenant somewhere where your opponent has a really easy path to your lieutenant. Like you want to try and like plan out the table for yourself to where you're making it as hard as possible for your opponent to engage into you, while you try and make it as easy as possible for you to engage into your opponent.
Absolutely. That kind of comes down to also understanding your opponent's lists, looking at what your opponent's deployed and going, where are the weak points? What can I do to cripple your list most efficiently? Especially when you've got guided tricks up your sleeve. So
Yeah,
that's probably game plan of your list, really. You go, what across there is, going to fucking die? And if it dies, are you really going to be hurting?
Yeah, like something I really like to do when I'm sort of like planning out my first turn is I'll sort of look at what's across the table and I'll try and set myself really manageable goals. For instance, when I played against Jacob at BCB a couple of weeks ago, I knew that against Bakunin especially, if I could remove the Chimera, I'd be in a really good position because his list seemed to lack a lot of forward moving elements if I removed the Chimera specifically. So that was one of the most important things during my first turn that I had to try and remove. Just as an example.
Absolutely. I think sometimes new players might focus on trying to kill expensive stuff. And
Mm.
sometimes the 7-point tiger is the most dangerous thing on the fucking table.
Yeah, like trying to like figure out one, what's going to cripple your opponent's list. Two,
What
what's going to
poses
most
the.
effective. Yeah, what poses the greatest threat to you?
Yep.
And three, if possible, can you kill your opponent's lieutenant and then, by and large, cripple their list because the turn of loss of lieutenant sucks dick.
It does. It really does. Uh, and this is something I don't know. You win so much. I don't know if you do it very often, but do you have any great examples of playing to your outs?
Yeah, actually. So against Dante at CanCon 2024, so just this year gone by, I had probably the worst game of Infinity that I've ever played.
Yep.
It was B Pong. That mission is disgusting, and I hate
Yes,
it.
of course.
Um, I was going second. I won 2 face-to-face rolls, I think, for the entire game. But because it was B-Pong, it didn't matter, and I was still neck and neck with Dante, basically. Dante finished his turn, and I was losing. The outs that I had to play, and it would have been very easy to just go, oh, I guess, oh well, that sucks. The outs I had to play to were I needed to suicide a Caliban to push the button to move the stupid fucking antenna thing, because it doesn't matter if they're holding the antenna, you can fucking move it.
Yep.
Hate B-Pong. I hate B-Pong so fucking much. And I needed to bring my Raziat in to secure the HVT. And if I had have just quit the game at that point, I would have lost, I think, Jesus Christ, 4 to 6 or something, I think.
Yep.
But because I did those plays, I was able to drag the game back to a 4-all draw.
Nice.
And then Dante and I both apologized to each other after the game and hugged it out. We did not show the best sides of ourselves in that game at all.
B-Pong does not bring out the best in us.
B-Pong brings out the worst in people. I'm so happy that mission is dead and buried.
So yes, it is very important. If you hit your third turn, maybe you get crit even in the middle of your turn. Sit there, take a minute, think, and go, what can I do? Don't tunnel vision. Don't go don't go ballistic that your main attack piece just died or whatever. There's always things you can do.
A huge part of avoiding tunnel vision is just like always taking that step back after something goes wrong and not just recommitting to a plan that is no longer going to work as well as it was before. Like if your main piece dies, don't just go, fuck it, I'm still going to stick with plan A. Take a step back, reevaluate, take a deep breath, and try and find a new alternate path. Can you recover the piece that went down? If not, what are your alternate pieces to do stuff with? And then just move on to a new plan. Because the more you sort of tunnel vision on a plan that is no longer going to work, the more stuff you're just going to feed into the wood chipper.
Absolutely. All right. Tournament day arrives. Now, I think the most important thing, some people get very caught up in going, I've planned for 3 months about how I'm going to win this tournament. And you go, take a step back, calm the fuck down, set something manageable.
Yep. My goal at every 2-day event that I go to is I set myself a goal of going 3-2. I want a positive record. That's the only goal I set for myself. I don't go into a tournament going, I'm going to win this whole thing. I'm like, I want to go 3-2. If I can go 3-2, I'll be happy with my performance.
Absolutely. You see good players all the time have bad tournaments. Whether or not round 1, it's almost like a top table showdown, or they had a really bad spree of dice rolls on a certain game kind of thing.
The number of times in specifically like round 3 or round 4 where I've seen like Hector and Kirby just knock themselves out of contention because they've smashed into one another at the worst possible time.
Absolutely. The amount of times I've played against Hector and fucking Drew, it's at least twice, and that's why it's weird.
That's so wild.
Yeah.
And again, with the idea of setting goals, remember, luck plays a huge part in winning a 2-day event. Like, you need to sort of accept that sometimes luck's not going to be on your side, and you're going to end up going, 4-1, 3-2. But also just knowing that sometimes you're just going to have to accept, like, I got kind of lucky, and I got through my 5 games, and we absolutely take those. Like, there is nothing wrong with getting lucky. I know there's some weird stigmas sometimes attached to getting lucky in a game, and it's like, no, that's just statistics and probability. Like, sometimes the improbable ARO roll from your opponent happens. Sometimes it's your improbable ARO roll that happens, and you win because of it. Don't be ashamed of it. Don't be annoyed by it. Just accept how luck is that important sometimes.
Absolutely. My favorite opponents to play against are the people where you crit them 3 times in a row and they go, oh, that was great. And then they just straight jump back fucking into it. There is not a single hiccup, and it's just so refreshing as Infinity, like as an Infinity player, to be like, you are celebrating my success as much as yours.
There is nothing funnier than critting, apologizing as your opponent is just fucking cackling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Onto that though, when you actually do sit down for that game, I have a pre-game checklist that I really like to go through. One, it's discussing the terrain of the table with my opponent and how we're going to treat stuff. Like, if there are trees, how are those going to be treated? Is this room infinite height? Is this scalable? Is this going to provide cover? Check some lines of fire as well. Ask your opponent about, like, oh, if something is here, can this see this? Give them your courtesy list if you have a courtesy list. Once they've deployed, ask about models. If they're proxying something, make sure you understand sort of what's on the table. It's something I especially like to do is because I have a dice tray, is I'll let my opponent know, hey, just so you know, anything that rolls outside of the tray, I don't count it. It has to roll inside the tray for the roll to count, just so they know that. Because I can't count the number of times where you haven't said that, and of course, it jumps out of the tray and it's either the exact roll you needed or the worst possible roll.
Yeah.
And you and your opponent have that really awkward moment of, oh, how are you treating this?
Yep. Yep. That's it. Sometimes it rolls on the floor and you go, oh, it's a crit. And you go, yeah, okay, mate. Yep. So that comes under making your intent as clear as possible, not just in the game, but around the whole aspect of the game. Hit me with it, Jordan.
Infinity is a game where you play by intent. Like, Infinity is a game where you work with your opponent to find the best outcomes. You will never play a worse game of Infinity than one where you and your opponent are not helping with and working with each other. You both need to be working to discover lines of fire. You need to be working with each other for stuff like zone of control, for finding out, hey, if this is here, does this see this? Does this piece see this here? Like, there's so much in Infinity that just doesn't work if you and your opponent refuse to work with each other.
Absolutely, absolutely. I've heard stories of other Jacob playing games against a guy, and he wanted him to turn around just to put down regular camo markers. And I was like, that's the kind of guy you don't want to be.
Yeah, no, that's a fucking
It's a bit
that's a fuck
weird. It's a bit
that's a
weird.
fucking weird one, isn't it?
It's a bit weird because
Yeah.
I'm going to turn back around and go, hey, where'd you put those camo markers?
Yeah, no. And a really big part of it as well about like playing with intent is also stuff like how you sort of deal with things like takesies backsies, right? Because I can't count the number of times where either myself or my opponent has been like, "Oh, I didn't see that there. Do you what are we gonna do?" And it's like 9 times out of 10, my rule of thumb tends to be everything on the table is public information. If you've missed something, that's fine. We can roll it back, provided the dice haven't been rolled yet and the information on the table hasn't changed. Like, if we've sort of committed to a play and you're like, oh, are you happy seeing this? But if I've flipped and revealed a model, and after I've revealed that model, you're then like, oh, I don't know if I want to do that, then we're probably moving into territory of no.
Yep, absolutely. So I don't know if you ever experienced this, but most of the time I rock up to a tournament, I'm buzzed as shit. We get our pairings. I walk up to the table. 5 minutes later, all my shit's deployed, and 30 minutes later, I'm in the shit because I was so excited. I wasn't thinking about the game. I was just talking to my opponent, and I just threw everything onto the table.
Oh my god, yes. Kev's asked a really good question, actually. Where do you stand on reminding your opponent about stuff like potential zone of control AROs, weapons, and equipment your stuff has? So for me personally, zone of control, I always ask my opponent sort of after they've moved, zone of control, is this within range of this? And if I've moved as well, hey, this is in range of this is in range of that. Stuff like quasi creatures or mines, etc., like camo markers, I'll sort of, when they've moved, I'll ask, like, hey, is your intent here to be within zone of control of this, or are you trying to stay out of zone of control? And once they've told me, no, my intent is to stay out of zone of control, I'm like, okay, cool. Let me know when you want to lock in this movement, and then once you do, we'll check zone of control. If their intent is to be inside of it, we really don't need to care at that point.
Yeah.
It's just about like not trying to like dickishly cash them out on something where they're like clearly making a mistake.
Yeah.
As for weapons and equipment, like weapons and equipment are like super public information. So like at any point, I'm happy to remind my opponent, "Hey, this has got this." But I'm not going to try and be a mind reader. Basically, like a really good example of that actually from Border Bash was I was playing against John Cook in round 4, and he walked his 4-man core of Tunguska Light Infantry up towards a Dadarazzi who dodged out to look at them, and he basically ignored it, walked forward, and I laid a template on top of them. He's like, "Oh, I forgot the Dadarazzi had chain rifles." I'm like, oh, "Okay, that's fine. Would you like to sort of roll that order back to the sort of start of it? Because no dice have been rolled, nothing like that."
Yeah, I'm very similar. I like my opponent to play their best game. So
Yeah.
if they move their tag a full 6 and I go, hey, there's a repeater there, you sure you want to do that? Let them move, whatever,
Repeaters,
whatever.
repeaters are a big one. Repeaters, it's always a case of being like, "Hey, just so you know, repeaters here. Is your intent to sort of be within 8 inches of that repeater, or are you trying to sort of skirt the border on it?"
Yeah, absolutely. And things like if they didn't know my guy had a flamethrower or something like that, I go, hey, you can move here, you can do this. I definitely love the work with your opponent aspect of like,
Yeah,
um,
yeah, exactly, Kev. Like if something's behind a building, you can't always see it. You can't assume that your opponent is looking from all the angles you're looking at stuff from. Like you could be looking at a camera marker that you have placed down, and it's clear as day to you. But go around and your opponent look from your opponent's side. It's like, oh, there is a fucking building in the way. Of course they can't see it. Like so much of this game is just don't be a dick, and like Infinity becomes really fun to play with people.
absolutely. Absolutely. It is a game where we want both people to have fun. And we don't want people to be like, oh no, I forgot that. Oh. And especially if your opponent's kind of doing it as well, try to be a bit more forthright with with being a good player, reminding them of things, kind of teaching them good habits almost. This isn't like 40k or Sigma or something like that where you know you're supposed to. Well, everyone thinks you're supposed to know these
Yeah.
things. You know,
In 40k, you can almost ignore your opponent for the majority of the game. You can't
mm,
do that with
no, you.
Infinity. Like, part of what I really like doing as well is when I'm moving stuff around, I'll be explaining to my opponent sort of what my intent is as I'm moving. It's like, hey, I'm moving Umbra Samaritan along here. Do you agree? It's like, nothing sees, nothing. All right, cool. Move it. Keep moving. Stuff like that, right? Like, not sort of giving a chance for sort of misinterpretation and like weird shit to happen is super important.
Yeah, and it also helps have faster games.
Yep.
If yeah, you go, hey, my intent is to move here and not be seen, and your opponent either goes says yes or no. You don't go, I move, and you go, oh no, bro, this guy can see you, and you go, oh shit, now I gotta go back. You go, no, it makes it
I
simpler.
think I think a really fun example of that actually was at BCB last year for me. It was playing we were playing the awful mission known as Capture and Protect. I basically ran a piece forward to grab the beacon. I then counted out how many orders I'd spent to do that, and I looked at my opponent and I'm like, hey, are you okay if I just flip over 4 orders and return the guy to the position he was in?
Yep,
And it's like, yep, cool, awesome. Saved a bunch of time.
those are that kind of thing is great. Everyone should be doing stuff like that.
It's just practicing really good habits. Like,
Yeah.
also, guys, reminder, if you're a patron of Lost the Lieutenant, you could be in the Discord call, listening to us record, asking questions in our patron chat. Like Kev has been doing. Kev's not a patron, he's a dirty, dirty old host, but the point stands.
Excellent. All right. Do you have any specific techniques, Jordan, for avoiding tunnel vision?
A big thing is just sort of like take a step back. Like if something doesn't go wrong, even if you think it should go right. Like if you shoot a Warcore and the Warcore doesn't die, don't then spend 6 more orders trying to kill that Warcore. Just move back, reevaluate, go try something else. Something I've done a bunch of times is I will spend 4 orders on a piece doing something with it. I'll then look at how many orders I have left in that group. I'll stop. I'll then move on to my second group and I'll start doing stuff with the second group because I don't want to like spend all the orders in that first group on this one piece and then realizing I needed to do something else.
I am 100% sure that everyone has gotten to the point where, oh no, I spent everything in group 1 and your missile bot was in group 1 and you go, ooh, I've got a really good opportunity to fucking spotlight this thing or whatever. Something like that. And it's all where, yeah, I agree with you. Like, people don't flip between groups. Like, that's something I think you do, not a lot of other people do. Maybe Val kind of does it. I see Val do it, but a lot of people here's my Harris. I spend 10 orders on it, and then we're on to group 2.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, there's definitely value in sort of like executing a plan with this in combat group and doing that, and then working around what that group has achieved. I just like giving myself the option to sort of stop, take a step back, reevaluate, do some stuff with the other troops that I have available to me. I also find that really helps with decision paralysis as well. Like, if I'm starting to sort of like get really unsure of what I'm doing with something in group 1, taking a step back, moving on to group 2 and doing something with that really tends to help like clear my mind and really sharpen and like bring into focus what I need to be doing with that other combat group.
Yeah, I think that's super important to being consistent.
Yeah, I think a fun example, a cool example of that actually you and I had at Border Bash was my Raicho stepped out, tried to shoot your Warcore, failed, and I went, that sucks. Alright. Don't tunnel vision. I'll go do something else for a little bit.
Absolutely. That impressed me very much. Because I think 90% of Infinity players would have done it again, just through the sheer audacity that a Warcore survived being shot at by a tag.
There is an immense amount of like, I bet that like every single person who is going to listen to this episode has had that moment of like, how fucking dare that thing survive what I just did?
Yes.
How dare you?
Okay, managing risk. This is a big one to me. And I think going back to like the factions that win, Toha won a bunch. And I think Toha won a bunch because not just because good players played it, but because it's really great at mitigating risk.
Toha is like the best faction in the game if you have no desire to play a game of Infinity with your opponent. Like, if you see a mission lineup and that mission lineup includes stuff like supplies where you don't need to kill a single point of your opponent's army to win the game, Toha fucking love lineups like that. The less Infinity that they have to play with their opponent, the better, because they're so good at mitigating the chance of things going wrong for them. Because Eclipse Smoke on 16s, like 2 dice 16s with your linked McCools, Mirror Ball for Eclipse Smoke just in zone of control with no need for line of fire. It is the ultimate faction in terms of risk mitigation. Unfortunately, not every faction of the game has access to that.
No, but when available, things that mitigate risk, like smoke, as you mentioned, and specifically for me, I think an underrated one is Berserk. Berserk is such an undercosted skill, in my opinion. When you have like Tigers that are 7 points, you have like things like Zellenkriegers and Denma. When you can get guaranteed hits on something, it's always worth its weight in fucking gold. I think
especially for taking out things like those CC specialist warbands. Like, I think 3 or 4 times now, I've just had my Tiger Berserk Den McConnelly, and it's like, I don't care what happens. Like, this is your problem. I'm not even going to run the risk of this man doing the things that he does.
Yes. So when thinking about making a list, when thinking about playing games, always consider the downsides to a particular dice roll. So you go, my tag might be 75% chance to win this dice roll, but if the tag only has 1 wound left, maybe it's just not fucking worth it for the risk that you might lose it. Because if you do lose it in your turn, that could be really bad.
Yeah. A really good thing to sort of like think about before you take like a face-to-face roll. Don't do this for every face-to-face roll, but do it for like ones that you think might be important. Is look at the situation and go, what's the worst thing that could happen resulting from this roll? And if the worst thing that can happen is my tag dies from 3 wounds to 0 wounds, think about, is there a potential for doing something else? is there a way for you to make that role better for yourself, like killing pieces of a link around that piece you're trying to remove? Is there a way for you to achieve your goal without needing to take this face-to-face role? But at the same time, you can't sort of like
you can't avoid all the risks.
You can't avoid all the risks. Like hyper risk averse Infinity players, like, end up being people who just will lose to ARO pieces that don't do anything because they're so terrified of the chance of something going wrong. Stuff like Grenza's, the Suryat HRL, Atalanta is a big one. Atalanta, they're all poison for like really risk averse Infinity players because they'll find themselves just so unwilling and worried about what's going to happen if something goes wrong that they will ignore those pieces to the detriment of their overall game plan, even if they have like a 75 to an 80% chance of just removing that thing from the table.
Yeah.
So it's all about balancing like those two outcomes and trying to find what the best one is for you.
Yeah, 100%.
Again, I can't wait for this episode to come out, and it's like, I have no fucking clue what this Jordan guy is like trying to explain to me on anything that he has said.
All right, guys, remember, be kind and have fun. Work with your opponent to help have the smoothest gaming experience possible, right? I don't know about you, Jordan, but I've definitely played games or TO'd and gone up to games where people are like, hey, I'm trying to do this and this and this. And I go, that is completely possible. We don't need to pick up the fucking model in a tape measure and measure fucking 2 inches up exactly and fucking blah, blah, blah. I go, I think that's possible. And we just agree there. It's possible. So you can do it.
It's asking your opponent, hey, this is what I would like to do. Do you agree that I'm going to be able to do this? And they're like, no, I don't think so. But if you think you can, that's when you sort of start getting down into kind of like the nitty gritty of a point and like trying to figure out if it is actually something you can't do. Because I have sworn on my mother that like a line of fire exists. And then it turns out, no, it fucking doesn't. You're an idiot.
Yeah. Yeah. Even simple things like slicing the pie. Sometimes people kind of, like, especially when you're on your side of the table, sometimes you go, no, you can't slice the pie that way. And I go, well, if we look at it physically, that guy's a little bit more right than this guy. So I'm going to see him first. So just simple.
I will say though, slicing the pie is one of those Infinity principles that, like, explaining that to a new player, you sometimes feel like you've just kicked their dog.
Yes.
It's one I really had trouble getting onto as well. I think I had like a 10-minute almost argument with Hector at like one of my early like one-day events where he was like trying to slice the pie and like explain it to me, and I'm like, yeah, but like you can't show me where that angle is. And he's like, yeah, but no, but it does exist because of the way your models are positioned.
Yes.
But yeah, slicing the pie is one of those things where like sometimes the first time it's explained to you, it feels like your opponent's trying to like cheat, but they're not. It's just how angles work. It's math, science, bitch.
Yep. We kind of mentioned this before as well, but play with intent and don't hold your opponent to silly mistakes. Remind them of obvious repeaters, point at AROs they might have missed, help them play their best game. Because ultimately, if they play their best game and they have fun, you're going to have more fun.
Yeah, something I like to do as well is I very much enjoy kind of matching the energy of my opponent during a game. Like, if my opponent's holding themselves to a much higher standard of play, I'll hold myself to that standard of play. Like, I'm not gonna like ream an opponent who is very clearly trying to play a relaxed game of Infinity, and I'm also good. But you know, if my opponent's sort of like, no, like I locked in that movement, that's fine. I'll do the same thing. It's just a sort of courtesy thing of like, I will feel better about a game if we both feel good about the way that we have approached it.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I love when people crit me. I love bursting out into laughter and going, "Good job, mate!" Because
I hate it. I love. Like you were talking before about, oh man, people critting me is fun. I'm like, no, it's not. Like, I still like winning a little bit too much to be really happy when I get crit. It's like, oh no.
I think it's really easy to make Infinity a bad experience for yourself.
Yeah, it is.
So
That's a big part of that as well. Is like the dice calculator. I feel like the dice calculator has made people hate Infinity a lot more than like they probably should. Because what you got to remember is it does give you the odds, but that's over a huge number of rolls before that sample size, before that probability ends up shaking out.
I'm pretty sure it's
Like,
millions.
yeah, exactly. Like, you need to accept that, like, yeah, the dice calculator might have said this, but like you are rolling one set of 4 dice
Yes.
when you're like shooting a HMG. You can 100% roll 4 20s, or you can roll 4 1s. Like, accepting that shit will just go wrong sometimes like that, you're gonna start having much more enjoyable games of Infinity, because everything's just gonna start flowing better.
Yep. Care less about the dice, and you'll have a better time.
Caring less about the dice is very important. Like, just rolling and being like, oh man, dice hate me today. Oh, that's good to know, I guess. And yeah, like, again, I can't stress this enough. Like, when you and your opponent are moving around the map, like, don't hold them to really, really stupid movement. Like, no, your opponent is very clearly not going to deliberately move their, like, vulnerable LT into fucking 8 inches of the Quasi creature. Like, point that out if they move there. It's like, hey, just so you know, this is here. Like, one I tend to do as well, because it tends to make things kind of funnier, is if they move within 8 inches of the Quasi creature, I'm like, my Quasi creature would like to punch you, but I don't think you want that. And they're like, no, I don't. I'm gonna roll this one. I'm like, absolutely. Again, but like, try and find like where your lines sort of are with that kind of stuff. My one personally is if the information on the table has changed, and when dice have been rolled. Like, if I've rolled dice, I tend to be pretty against sort of rolling stuff back at that point.
Once dice have been rolled, it's locked in.
Yeah, and same with like if I've revealed a model or my opponent's revealed a model. But again, like, that doesn't just mean like as soon as your opponent does a thing, snap reveal the model, so they have to lock in that decision. It's like, go, hey, this is seeing. You okay with that? Yep. Alright, cool. Reveal.
Yeah, even myself, if let's say my opponent goes, hey, I'm going to reveal this and do this, and I go, oh, sorry, I'm not HI. Or like reveal their hidden deploy Malignos or whatever,
exactly.
and go, I'm going to Oblivion you. And I go, I'm sorry, I'm not hackable because I'm Ariadna HI or some shit. And I go,
for sure.
no, don't hold you. Like, I know where it is, so I'm kind of up already. Just put it back in hidden deployment. That's fine. I don't mind.
That's definitely one that I've sort of encountered before as well. Man, we fucking smashed through this. This was great.
We kind of smashed it. We kind of smashed it, and I feel like we should talk. I'd have more to talk about. I don't know.
No, for sure. You know what? We have some of our lovely patrons in the chat right now.
Hit us with some questions.
Yeah, if you guys have any questions, hit us up with some questions. Otherwise, we'll probably ramble a little bit more about good habits and stuff like that. But otherwise, this has been a very, very fun episode. I don't actually know if we're going to be allowed to record another one, because boy howdy, who knows what we've done wrong.
Yeah, we're not reliable.
No, we're definitely not reliable. Dad should not have given us a recording device.
No.
Oh man, how do you? How much with like best sport do you sort of feel? Do you feel it's a popularity contest, or do you really feel like that it shows? If that makes sense, I don't know how to phrase this.
I think when it comes to any award in Infinity, you can't take it personal.
Yeah,
and you can't have any, like, everyone's going to have prejudice towards something, whether or not, let's say you're a little bit more socially awkward, and you might, you're not as open and as, laughing and whatever else. Generally, people will vote you less. Unfortunately, that's just kind of the nature of things. You might be an amazing person, and obviously, people, if they play their friends, they'll rate them higher.
Same with painting.
Painting. You could like red more than you like fucking orange or fucking blue. And you see a red army and it's amazing to you. but someone else might see the other army and be like, that's technically better in terms of the painting technique or whatever. So
yeah, for sure.
You can never take it personally, and you can only strive to do your best.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That's fantastic lesson for Infinity in general. It's
Infinity, yeah.
Just try and play the best game of Infinity that you know how to play. Like, joke with your opponent, have fun, like, put your best foot forward, because it's a very tight-knit community, especially here in Australia. Always just put your best foot forward. Like, no one is coming into a tournament with the plan to give someone a bad play experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or just put your best foot forward and have the most fun you can. I think on that note, though, that might be time to
We're not getting
roll
any
this
questions?
one in.
Oh my
That's
god.
fine. That's fine.
Yeah, sure. Alright. I've
Alright.
been Tristan.
And I've been Jordan, and this might be the last recording that we do for Loss of Lieutenant.
Good night, guys.